I used to work as a pizza delivery driver for Domino's. The most insane thing that happened in my time there took place one late Friday night. Obviously, Fridays are pretty busy for pizza deliveries, and we were also open very late, I think to 2 a.m. So I started work at 6 p.m. and was working until close. It was a busy night as it went on, but I made lots of money in tips. When it was around midnight, things started to quiet down. I remember that we got an order and I was supposed to deliver it. It was just a simple medium pepperoni pizza, and I took it and went to my car. When I saw the address, I didn't think much of it at first. It was just an address. However, when I arrived, I realized that it was another Domino's pizza. I figured that this must be some kind of a prank or something. The Domino's location was less than 10 minutes from ours. But as you know, Domino's is an extremely popular chain, and they're all over the place. I wasn't quite sure if this was a mistake or a joke or a prank or what. I parked in the parking lot, took the pizza, and then headed inside. I remember that this Domino's was in a sort of quieter street on the edge of an area with other restaurants and stores. The parking lot was mostly empty, and at the end of the small lot behind the building there was a steep hill going up with tons of trees on it. That led up to a wooded area. So I went inside the Domino's with the pizza, and the workers inside seemed confused. I said that somebody ordered a pizza there and asked if this was a joke. The 3 employees inside stopped making pizzas and all looked around at each other asking if they had pranked one of them. None of them had done it though. It seemed as though maybe someone else had. I asked if anybody wanted the pizza and they said no. However, the pizza was not paid for yet. I told them that I was just as confused as they were and I would take the pizza back and say it was a mistake or something. So I left the Domino's and started heading back to my car. Just then is when I heard a voice yelling from just inside the woods to my far left. It was a man's voice, and he said, "Hey, over here." I looked, and there was a guy standing a few steps on the hill. He said that he had been the one to order the pizza, so I started to walk over to him, hoping to get some kind of an explanation for this. I mean, what was he doing in the woods? Why didn't he just order from the Domino's that was right here? I figured maybe he made a mistake and ordered online from the wrong location or something. But if he was there, why would he request for it to be delivered? When I got to him, he didn't give me an explanation though. He just said, "Bring the pizza up here." Then the man started to walk up this narrow path that was barely even there through the woods. So I took the pizza up the steep hill, nearly tripping over all the tree branches and stuff. When I reached towards the top, we were in this thick woods where I could barely see. It was like pitch black, and the man stood there and then took the pizza from me. I told him the price, and he took his wallet out of his pocket and started counting his cash. As he was doing that, I looked around and then noticed something strange. There was another guy sitting in one of the trees about 20 feet up. The guy was wearing a ski mask as well, just sitting on a branch up in the tree, seemingly looking in my direction. This situation was seeming really sketchy and not something at all that I had signed up for. As soon as the guy gave me a $10 bill, I just took it, said thanks, and then started walking away very quickly. The guy said, "Don't you want a tip?" I said, "Keep it," and then just started to walk back down the hill as fast as I could. I didn't stop and nearly ran back down the hill the rest of the way to the parking lot. Then I literally jogged to my car, got inside, and left. I drove back to the Domino's that I worked at, and I told what happened to everyone that was inside working. They found it very amusing. I could laugh about it afterwards, but the scene was just so bizarre and strange, and I have no idea what was going on there. Maybe it was just a prank to scare me. If so, it certainly worked. This happened back many years ago. I was in high school in the early 2000s, and one night my parents went out. They left me and my older sister at home, so it would just be the 2 of us at the house for dinner. Now, at the time, my older sister was 17 years old, and I was 14. We lived in a house in a pretty typical neighborhood. Our parents left us some money to order a pizza or something, and that was the plan. When it got to be like 7 p.m., I told my sister that I was hungry and we should order from this one pizza place that was my favorite. She agreed, and then she called the store with our order. Around 20 minutes later or so, we were just in the living room watching TV, and the doorbell rang. My sister got up and answered with the money that our parents left us. I was like half paying attention as I was more focused on the TV. I heard my sister answer the door and the pizza guy say hello and stuff. I remember that I heard the pizza man ask my sister if she was home by herself, and she replied just saying no. The man said something like, "Oh really?" He couldn't see me from where I was in the living room. The guy said something else, but I couldn't really hear it. I heard my sister respond, but couldn't really make out what she was saying either, but it sounded like she was talking in a kind of rude way. I looked over at that point and saw that my sister appeared kind of annoyed. She handed the money to the guy, and then as he was still saying to have a good night, she slammed the door in his face. Then my sister locked the door as soon as it was shut, sighed, and started walking back over to the living room. I asked her what that was all about. She said, "I forgot about that creep." She went on to say that she was at her friend's house like 2 weeks prior, and the two of them had ordered a pizza. The same delivery guy was the one to show up. I guess that he acted really creepy, trying to flirt with my sister and her friend, and he even asked to come inside the house. They practically had to yell at him to leave and slam the door in his face. She said that she was planning to not order from that pizza place anymore because of him, but forgot about it. I thought that was weird, but I was glad that he was gone now and we had the pizza. I remember that just about 20 or 30 minutes later though, I heard a noise outside. It sounded like a car door closing. I looked out of the living room window and I saw the same pizza guy walking up to the house again. He had a small box in his hands and I wondered why he was at our house again. We hadn't ordered anything else. I warned my sister, and she got up and said that she was going to call the police. Before she could, though, the man started ringing the doorbell again. My sister and I ignored it at first. Then there was a knock on the door. My sister walked over to the door, did not open it or anything, but yelled at the man to go away. He yelled back from the other side, saying that he brought her a free brownie. She said she didn't want it, and was going to call the police if he didn't leave now. What the man said next really creeped me out. He said that he knew my sister was alone, and asked for her to let him in. That's when I knew I had to do something. This guy apparently really thought that she was home alone. I stood up and walked over to the door. Then, trying to sound tough, I yelled really loud in my manliest voice that I was also home and that I was going to come out and beat him to a pulp if he didn't leave. At first, I thought it didn't work. The man said something like, "Who's this tough guy?" He still stood around on the front step and didn't seem too affected, as my sister was now dialing the police. The guy laughed a little, as if trying to sound like the whole thing was a joke to him. Then he finally turned and started walking off. I remember that he walked back to his car and then got in and drove away. The police still came to our house a while later though. My sister made a report and then the cops went to his work. I heard that the man later got fired. Thankfully, he did not come back to our house again after that. I'm glad that I was home that night and was able to help out my sister. The guy was a total creep, and hopefully he didn't harass anyone else like that. I used to work as a delivery driver for the local pizza place that was by me. It was a pretty good place and popular in the local town. There would be a lot of deliveries that I would get, and I would have to drive all over. I still remember my creepiest delivery though. It was kind of like the stereotype delivery that I did not want to get when I signed up for the job. So we got an order pretty late at night, like 11 p.m. I got the pizza and then I got the address and headed out. I didn't know where it was, but I knew that I had never really delivered to that area before. At this point, I was still fairly new to the job, and I was also young, like 18 years old. Upon arriving to the neighborhood, I saw that it was really sketchy looking and run down. Many houses there had overgrown yards, and some had boarded up windows. There were old cars with duct tape holding up the fenders and looking all beat up. When I got to the house that I was to deliver to, it didn't look any better than the rest. I was already creeped out and didn't even want to leave the car, but I had a job to do, so I parked on the side of the street and then got out. There was also hardly any light provided by street lamps. There were just a few, and then I crossed the street and I walked onto the property. I made my way to the front step and then rang the doorbell. I saw that all the lights inside the house appeared to be off, which was not a good sign. As I waited, I was getting more and more nervous by the second. After probably a full minute, I still hadn't heard anything. I wanted to just bolt out of there and go back to the shop. Still, I forced myself to stay there because the pizza had not yet been paid for. Within a few more seconds, I started to hear movement inside, like somebody was walking around, but I still didn't see any lights turn on or anything. I just had a strong instinct to run and get out of there, so I did. I just set the pizza down and then bolted, like I had wanted to do much earlier. I literally ran off the property, leaving the pizza on the front step. Then I crossed the street again and made it to my car. After I got inside and started the engine, I felt much safer. Before leaving, I looked around. That's when I saw what appeared to be a man walking through the front yard. It was really dark, so I couldn't see very well, and the house was slightly behind me, but I saw a guy start to walk out and cross the street from the property. He was like 50 feet at least behind my car, and he wasn't walking towards me, but it still seemed odd. It seemed like this was the guy who had been in the house, and he hadn't even picked up the pizza. So at that point, I started to drive away. As I was making my way down the street, I saw the lights to this car that had been parked a ways behind me on the street turn on. That guy must have gotten inside of it. Then the car started driving. The first thing that I noticed at this point was how quickly the car accelerated, much too quick for the residential street that we were on. As I continued to drive, the car quickly caught up to me and was soon right on my bumper. That gave me a bad feeling once again. I turned off the street to a busier one, and the car behind me did the same thing. I realized then that I was likely being followed. I started driving around randomly and turning at random places. The car kept up with me and did the same things that I did. With it being really late at night, the roads were pretty quiet. That made it probably easier for the guy to keep up with me. It wasn't until I had been randomly driving around for like 10 minutes that I remembered to go to a police station, and it worked like a charm. The guy followed me until we were there. Then he circled around the parking lot of the station before leaving. I stayed there for a few minutes, called my boss to explain what had happened, and then went back. Luckily, I didn't get in trouble with my boss for not getting the money for the pizza. He understood that it could have been dangerous. I didn't have to deliver to that neighborhood again, which I'm really grateful for. Other than that, I enjoyed being a pizza delivery driver. That story still gives me the creeps to think about, though. This is something that happened a few years ago. So, I live alone in a 2-story house about 10 minutes outside of the city. I enjoy living here, and one night I ordered a pizza to be delivered. I was certainly craving a nice pizza, and I was excited for it to arrive. A while later, I heard the doorbell ring, and I walked over and answered it. It was the pizza delivery guy, and I handed him the money, and he gave me the pizza and breadsticks. My hands were full, and I remember that after saying bye to the delivery guy, I was struggling with the door. He said that he would get it, and he shut the door for me as I walked to the kitchen with the pizza boxes. Then I went and got some pieces of pizza, went into the living room, and watched a movie while eating. It was a great relaxing night, until a few hours later. I was now watching another movie and still on the couch. Out of nowhere, though, I heard the front door opening. I was so confused at first. Obviously, I live alone, so nobody else would be entering the house. It was at that moment that I realized I hadn't locked the front door. Normally, it's a habit that whenever I close the front door, I lock it. However, my hands had been full with the pizza, and I hadn't closed the door. The pizza guy had. I had simply forgot to go back and lock it. I couldn't believe someone was entering the house, though, and I didn't know who. I did what made the most sense to me at the time. I jumped down from the couch onto the carpeted floors. Then I crawled over to the corner of the room, and I hid behind this large lazy boy chair. The living room was also in the back corner of the house, and the opposite end from the front door, so I had a little bit of time to hide. It was a pretty good hiding place, but if whoever was in my house really looked, they would find me. I heard footsteps, and I realized that I didn't have my phone. I had left it on the couch about 15 feet away from me. This was not good. Whoever was in the house entered and then started walking closer. They went into the kitchen area and then the dining room. Then I heard them start to enter the living room. That's when I got really nervous. However, whoever this was didn't get that close to where I was hiding. They stayed at the far end of the room and seemed to walk up the stairs. I didn't dare try to look and see who it was, and I stayed put. When I heard the person reach the top of the stairs, I decided to make a run for it. I knew that I would be able to make it out of the house if I was quick. So I got up, tiptoed to the couch, got my phone, and then ran over to the front door. I left the house, called 911, and then ran to my car and got inside of it. I drove a few blocks away and waited for the police. They arrived a short time later and entered my house with my permission. They ended up finding a man hiding upstairs in my bedroom. I had no clue who he was and had never seen him before to my knowledge. He obviously had just walked right in the house. I was really grateful that I was able to get away when he went upstairs. I'm also grateful that he was still there so the police were able to catch him. I used to be a pizza delivery driver. It was a job that I had for about a year when I was younger. The pizza place that I worked for was pretty good. I enjoyed working there. I remember that we had this one customer though that got banned from ordering from us. He would often call and order pizzas to his house. Then he would act really creepy or rude to the delivery drivers. 3 different ones had all reported him, sometimes multiple occasions. So our manager ended up banning him, and there was literally a note on the wall saying not to accept his order, because he would try calling and ordering, or ordering online, and we wouldn't let him. A couple of times after he was banned, some of his orders got through because we had forgotten, and that led to more complaints. I personally never had to deliver to him, but I heard from the other drivers that he was just not nice at all. I guess he cursed out one of the delivery drivers for no apparent reason once. Another time, he called one of the drivers a curse word, and then another time he tried to get one of the delivery drivers to enter his house, and when they said no, he literally tried to pull her inside. We ended up getting a new manager hired though, who was part-time. His name was Andy, and overall he was cool, but kinda bossy. One time when I was working as a delivery driver, he gave me a pizza and an address and told me to deliver it. I immediately recognized it as the banned address. I took it up with Andy, and I told him how the guy was banned and we weren't supposed to deliver there. Andy said that he had already took the order. He said, "Look buddy, just do one more delivery there for me." So it was apparent that I had to go, so I took the pizza and then left. I was kinda mad at Andy, but I was also curious how the creepy man would act. I figured maybe I could just give him the pizza, get the money, and leave without a problem. How hard could it be? If he wanted to yell stuff at me for whatever reason, he could go right ahead. I didn't really care. I didn't know if the guy was just a grouch or if he enjoyed being rude to people or what. Eventually, I arrived. He lived in what looked like a pretty typical neighborhood. I took the pizza, got out of the car, and then walked up to the front step. Before I even reached it though, the guy opened his front door and was looking at me. He looked to be in his 50s or so, had dark sort of long hair and a handlebar mustache. He also had an open can of Miller Lite in his hand. "Who the F are you?" he called out as I was walking up. I said, "I'm the pizza delivery driver delivering the pizza that you ordered, sir." He then told me to just give him the pizza already and shut up. So I walked up to him and handed him the pizza. I could smell the strong smell of beer as well as cigarettes coming from inside the house. I told him the price, and the guy said, "You expect me to pay for this crap?" That's when I got worried that I wasn't going to get out of there with any money. I told him, "Yes, I need the money." The man then said that he had the money inside his house, and I could go and get it if I was brave enough. I thought about it for a moment and thought, no, I don't think I am. But then I realized that I really needed to get the money or Andy would get mad at me. So I tried to do a compromise and I asked the man to go get the money for me. He said no. Then I reluctantly said that I would go get it. The man stepped back and I entered the house. It was very cluttered. There were boxes and beer cans everywhere. I stayed just inside of the door. The man then said that the money was in the basement. At that point I thought, heck no, and I turned around and just walked out. The man started saying something, but I didn't even care. I ran out of his yard and back for my car. He was yelling at me the whole time. I got in my car, left, and drove back to work. When I arrived back, I was furious with Andy. I told him that the guy was totally insane and we never should have took the order. Andy asked for the money, and I said how the guy didn't pay. Andy started to give me some kind of new employee orientation lecture about how I have to make sure I get money from the customers or the business will lose money. That really ticked me off. I literally started yelling at Andy that the guy was trying to get me to go into his basement. It got heated for a moment, but Andy ended up understanding, and after a conversation, he was cool about it in the end. After that, we never delivered to that guy again.